Hello. So today I thought I'd do a quick kind of buyer's guide, reference guide on the Noble M12. I've seen lots and lots of comments recently with people that are interested in them but don't know much about them, and the same sort of questions keep coming up. So I thought I'd just do a kind of an overview, kind of like a review of it, things to look out for. This isn't a gospel guide. I'm sure there's plenty of opinions out there. And if you are seriously interested in buying a Noble, my suggestion would be to go onto the Facebook group, type in Noble M12 stroke 400 or 600, anything like that. You'll see that there's a forum, there's a group there you can join, plenty of information there. And above all, I think if you're really serious, go and speak to someone like Jetstream or speak to Dave at DTB Motorsport. Both of those guys are Noble gurus pretty much, and will be able to advise you with the things that you want to look for. But for now, we're just going to run through the Noble and see what you think. Okay, of the M12 there are essentially three different models. Started off with the early ones in sort of 2001 I believe onwards, was the M12 GTO. That is a 2.5 litre engine, 5-speed gearbox. That was later then changed to the M12 GTO 3 with a 3 litre later type Ford engine with a 5-speed gearbox. Then it was upgraded when they went to the 3R, which was the M12 GTO 3R, which is a 6-speed gearbox 3 litre engine. That one produces 354 brake horsepower as standard, and the 2.5 litre produced 310 as standard. Most of the ones you'll find now have had upgrades, and I'll run through those with you in a minute. This particular vehicle here is a very early 2003 car. It's February 2003 I believe, and it's the GTO 3, so it has the 3 litre engine in it. It is also worth pointing out that there is also a M400, which looks pretty much exactly the same. It has some slight body changes onto it, but it's almost identical. It's a more track focused later type one, which was kind of 2004. They have 425 horsepower and a slightly different setup, but it's exactly the same engine, same gearbox. So there you go. So first off, GTO 3 as well as the GTO had lights like this, round lights Frenched into the bodywork. The GTO 3R has a different light setup on the front here, and you'll notice, and it's covered in a lens. That's pretty much the straightforward way of knowing the difference between the M12 GTO GTO 3 and the M12 GTO 3R and M400s as well. Okay, so the Noble M12s and M400s don't have any luggage space, so they have a clam front and rear, so front clam, rear clam. Any luggage you need goes behind the seats, the driver's and passenger seats, and there's a little shelf behind there as well. At the time when these were new, you could get hold of a Noble branded luggage set, which kind of clipped in behind the back there. They are pretty rare now and hard to get hold of, but it does give you enough, certainly I would say, if there were two of you, for a weekend away for sure. There is actually quite a bit of space behind there. So one thing to point out, another obvious thing to tell the difference between a GTO 3 and the 3R. The GTO and the GTO 3 have the exposed weave spoiler on the back. The GTO 3Rs and M400s as well, actually, this is body colour coded. But what you will find on a lot of Nobles is people do modifications to them. So they may change the spoiler for a different type of spoiler. A lot of people will also put in vents down the bottom to allow air out of the back of the clam. And some people put M400 scoops, so there's some scoops that kind of sit externally to the bodywork here. So some people put those on as well to enhance the look. So here we are with the rear clam lifted up. Quite a cool thing to note is this rear clam, there's two split pins down the bottom, and you can take the whole clam off, which is really, really cool. So it means kind of like working on it and things like that are really, really easy to do. So looking at the engine. Now, this is the 3 litre lump. It's very much distinguishable from the 2.5. The 2.5 has a completely different inlet manifold. So you can always tell from this thing. You'll also see the exact same engine, or look exactly the same at least anyway, if you lifted up the bonnet of a Mondeo from sort of like the early to mid 2000s. The ST220, I believe it was, had you would have seen that engine in there. So things to look for, the most common things anyway. Most people, including me, have upgraded the intercooler on these for a larger pro alloy intercooler. Definitely helps with the performance. Probably the most important thing is this vapor tank here, so this breather tank. These engines do breathe quite a bit. The standard one recirculates back into this pipe here, but it's made of steel, and what can happen over time, because these cars are old now, this particular one is 19 years old, is basically the paint on the inside, it basically rusts. Paint can get in there, and then the rust mixes and all that kind of stuff, and this bleeds back into the bottom of the engine. So you don't want rust in your oil, right? So it's a standard upgrade for that there, and that vents to the atmosphere. Other things are people can do and have done the air filters be remounted onto the bulkhead here. It's quite handy because there is a gap between the clam and the main shell here, so the air actually does go straight into them. It's not a modification I've done, but it's a standard modification, and most of them that I've seen have got that modification. It also adds for more noise inside the cabin, which some people like as well. So things to kind of look out for on the engine. The engines themselves are pretty solid. They've normally had some sort of modification done of some type, whether that's turbos or whatever. The turbos, there's one down here and then one down here, sitting either side of the V6 engine. Always worth checking those standard things with any car really, with a turbo, certainly of this age, is to get it warm, get it on boost, and see if there's any smoke coming out the back of it. The turbos can leak. A lot of the oil lines and things like that, if they're not replaced properly, they can dry out, perish and crack, so just looking for leaks around these in general. Some people change the header tank there for the coolant for a aluminium one. I haven't. I personally kind of like the almost factory look of it, but that's another upgrade that a lot of them have got done to it. Looking down under here, you should be able to see one of the turbos at least, which is just sat up there. So nice and easy to get to, but the one at the other side of the engine is not. You'll notice on this one up here there is a stainless steel manifold. The manifolds on the Nobles tend to crack. The later ones had extra strength welded into them, but they still cracked and let bits of metal flake off of them, and obviously you don't want that going through your turbo. So something to look for is whether it's had the manifolds, the exhaust manifolds replaced, and if they're standard, it's just to watch out. They're not cheap. You're talking probably for two of those 1,500 quid, so it's well worth bearing that in mind. A lot of people have had the exhaust changed on them. This is standard exhaust. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a perfect exhaust, so there's no point in changing it. If you're looking for big power out of these, i.e. you're looking 450 plus, then you want to definitely change that exhaust. However, the standard one seems perfectly fine, and I know there are some cars out there that are running that kind of power with the standard exhaust as well. So that's something worth checking. Suspension, while we're here, actually, as you can see here, this has got upgraded M400 suspension. There are a number of aftermarket suspensions you can get. The most common one is I think they're called Protec shocks, which are basically a straightforward replacement on these. But yeah. One other thing to point out, so we're right at the bottom of the engine down here, but that flat metal piece there is actually what's called a track day sump. So it's a larger capacity sump, and it's also baffled as well. That is a very, very common upgrade. Pretty much most of them have got them by now. If you check out my other videos, you'll see me actually fitting this. This was also something that, if you do intend on taking it on the track, is a must. But yeah, so you can tell by looking underneath the car as well. I just can't get under it at the moment, but most of them will have had this upgrade done. So looking around this side of the engine, you can see here this looks fairly new. I've replaced this. This is just an air pipe, obviously into the air filter. This isn't standard. Normally there would be a different pipe on there, but effectively that's just the compressed air going into the engine. Some people have blow-off valves here and things like that. I didn't want that, although you still get the dump of the air from the turbo because the turbos have their own wastegate. Another thing on the engines to check, obviously, other than the standard kind of belts and leaks of water and things, these hoses can get old in time, especially these ones, so any coolant hoses are well worth checking to see if they're old and perished. This particular car has got the 6-speed box in it, so this was a modification that was done early on in its life, and it's also an LSD. Sounds silly, but you can tell with an LSD box because they've got them written on it, and that is actually true. Ford wrote LSD on them. This is also an upgrade. This is the gear linkage for the 6-speed box. This is an M400 gear linkage, so a later type gear linkage. It's supposed to make the changing the gears much more kind of smooth, or more precise, shall we say. I haven't experienced one without the M400 linkage, but I have heard a lot of comments about how it can be a bit sloppy. So that is an upgrade. Your fuel tank sits here right behind the passenger, and in under here is the fuel pump. So another one to kind of check is there is something called the fuel pump modification, or an uprated fuel pump some people put in, and that's to make it more reliable. So you can ask most owners if that's been done. It's not a necessity, but most people have had it done by now. Okay, so looking under the front clam, straight away you'll notice there's what we call a drip tray here. This is a carbon fibre one, which is available. I can put a link in the description as to who to contact to get one of those. But effectively that stops the water running down the front, because under here is your master cylinder, and then you've got your wiper mechanism here and some wiring. So it's always good to kind of cover that up to stop the water running straight down it, and of course onto the bulkhead of the car. This one has got a Pro alloy radiator, which again is a very common upgrade. The standard ones tend to crack. I have done a video of me installing this. It also has twin fans, which is a later type setup as well for extra cooling. So again, that's an upgrade that's been done. Most of them have got that kind of upgrade. Again, moving on to cooling hoses, I mentioned earlier, these are all new, and the hoses go kind of under here and then they go down through the car. There's a modification called the tunnel cooling mod, which is basically taking ducting from here and sending it down the tunnel. Because there's water pipes that effectively run down there, that tunnel can get very hot, which makes the cabin very hot, and it makes the actual gear lever very hot. So by ducting air down there, it keeps the thing nice and cool. Other than that, there's not really a lot to show you under here, obviously than the lack of storage space. Okay, let's talk wheels. So these are 18-inch, these are aftermarket Team Dynamics wheels. These aren't the wheels that would have been on this as standard. There are a few different upgrades available for these. I can put some links in the description there. Obviously it's discs all round. These calipers I've had basically refurbished and painted up to look lovely. Another thing that I've had done on this particular one is had the discs skimmed on the hubs, and that was to ensure that they're perfectly true and flat to the hub, which actually has improved my braking a considerable amount. But effectively, yeah, there's not a huge amount to say about the wheels, other than obviously if you're looking at one, just check them all. But remember, this is a rear-wheel drive car, so you're likely to wear out the rear tyres before the fronts as well. If we move to the cabin, Nobles have a 4-point harness as well as a 3-point seat belt. Again, that's quite a common thing. This bolster wears out, as it does with any car. These ones are good, but they've been retrimmed. The seats are surprisingly comfortable in a Noble, actually. Everyone that's been in here has said to me how comfortable it is to ride. This interior is pretty much standard. Any upgrades or anything like that, I have got videos. I'm due to upgrade this to a carbon fibre piece at some point soon. But effectively, there's not a lot to see in here. This is basically part of the chassis, and under here is the aluminium floor. Something else, Nobles are completely flat bottomed with aluminium sheeting. One thing to check maybe, what can happen is that sheeting is riveted, but it's also sealed to the underneath of the car. After time, that seal can break and water can come in, and so you end up with wet carpets and things like that. A lot of them again have had that taken off and been resealed. It's quite an in-depth job to do, but obviously one just to check to see if it's been done. There's also behind here a fuse box, and just pull this cover down. Up there you can see there's 2 tabs. You just pull that down and you can see I've got a leaf in here when I was last in here, but B, you can then see all the fuses. So just check in here, check for water as well, because they can, or at some point some people have reported having water in here and it drips in, I believe from the heater above, from the AC part of the heater, and then that causes dampness on the fuses. One other thing that's good to do with any Noble is just, if you do buy one, is take these fuses out and clean the terminals, because they can get corroded, and that's probably most of the causes of any kind of like malfunction, because the fuses are actually corroded. So there we have it. That was a quick overview and a walk around of the Noble. I hope you enjoyed it. What I would say is, if it's something you're interested in, maybe you're looking at buying a Noble, ask yourself, what do I want from a car? What do I want it to do? The Noble is a brilliant car. It delivers something that no other car can. It stands out amongst all the other cars because it was produced in such low numbers, and because it's so rare, it always gets looks wherever it goes. It goes to supercar shows and people love it. If, however, you want a car that's super reliable, like a Porsche, it isn't a Porsche. It was built with very low numbers. It was hand built, and they're about 20 years old now. So there's a lot of stuff that you do need to make sure has been done to them, or at least gone through. My best piece of advice I could give you is, if you're interested in one, speak to the professionals. Go onto Facebook and have a look on the Noble forum. Ask some questions on there. There's plenty of people that have owned them, have got a lot of experience. Speak to Jetstream Motorsport. They know the cars inside out. Or speak to Dave at DTB as well. Those guys are the absolute professionals when it comes to Nobles. So they'll be able to tell you all the kind of things that you might expect to experience, but also all the good things about them, and then give you an indicative cost of what it will cost to run one. If you've got a well-sorted one and all the jobs have been done that need to be done, you can look to probably spend around £1,000 a year just to keep it serviced, if you go to a garage, obviously, and maybe for some kind of add-on bits that you might want to do to it. But bearing in mind, prices of these cars are on the up, and their prices of the parts are also on the up. So if you have to do work to it, like replace the radiator, like replace the exhaust, expect to be spending quite a bit of money to do that. But I hope it's helped. Please put some comments below. I'm sure there's lots of different views from people and opinions. This is just mine. I'm not saying I'm an expert on it. I've owned the car for 2 years and I've had to do quite a bit of work to it, so I kind of learned a lot about the car, and I've spoken to a lot of people. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. If you would like to see more videos, just like and subscribe. See you soon.